The night is quiet, too quiet. Shadows stretch longer than they should, and every creak in the house whispers a secret you don't want to hear. Tonight, the darkness isn't empty, it's watching. From haunted houses where mazes twist your mind, to strangers lurking just beyond the porch. From the echo of footsteps in your own home, to figures in the shadows, waiting, patient, silent. Every story, every scream, every knock, it's real. Tonight, fear has many faces, and if you dare to listen, the night will never let you forget.
I was 22 years old, attending a Halloween party at my former best friend Nick's house. Nick had passed away from a heroin overdose in 2013. But before that, he was obsessed with Halloween. Every year, while his parents flew to New York for their own parties, Nick transformed his house into a haunted spectacle. Giant walls of cardboard covered in wallpaper created a maze, and every corner was filled with horrifying props. We all knew he spent far too much money, but that was Nick. I want to keep this PG-13, so I'll skip the drugs and alcohol and go straight to when things went wrong. That night, me, Nick, and a few other guys, Vinny G, Joey, and Q, were upstairs in Nick's room when we heard two loud bangs from downstairs. Panicked, Nick rushed to the door to see what was happening. Screams echoed through the house, guys and girls alike, and it sounded like a crowd was terrified for their lives. We all shouted at Nick to get back and close the door. Even under the influence, we understood the danger. He returned, locking the door behind him, his face pale and frozen in horror, like someone who had just seen murder. "What did you see? What's happening?" we demanded. He didn't answer fully, he just told us to hide. From that moment, none of us questioned him. Nick hit the lights and hid in the closet with Joey. I crawled under the bed with Q, and Vinny G squeezed into a storage box. From our hiding spots, we could hear the music downstairs stop abruptly, followed by a grown man screaming orders. A girl screamed in terror, then silence fell, broken by more shouting. Two other voices joined in, confirming at least 3 intruders. Boots stomped up the stairs and stopped outside our door. One tried the doorknob, then rammed it. After some shots rang out at the lock, the door swung open. We held our breaths, hearts racing. The black boots approached the closet. Nick begged, offering money if they would spare him. The intruder forced him downstairs, leaving the rest of us in hiding.
The house was silent, except for Nick's muffled voice downstairs. We stayed under the bed, trembling, unsure if the intruders were still around. Minutes dragged on like hours. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart stop. We dared not make a sound, our minds racing with terror. Eventually, the front door slammed shut. Nick ran back upstairs, pale and shaken. He told us the intruders had finally left. I felt a sick mix of relief and horror as we all tried to process what had just happened. When I stepped into the living room, the scene froze me in place. 2 of our friends, Jen and Robbie, lay lifeless on the floor, blood pooling around their heads. My stomach turned. The reality of murder hit me like a freight train. The police arrived soon after. They seemed more interested in identifying the masked men than in the chaos the party had become. Nick confided in us that there had been 4 intruders, all wearing fedoras, vendetta masks, gloves, and goats. They demanded $100,000, and when Nick couldn't produce it, they forced him to fill a sack with his most valuable possessions. Every partygoer who had been in his room had to throw their wallets into the sack under threat of being shot. After that night, Nick changed. He became depressed, started drinking excessively, and eventually dropped out of school.
he turned to harder drugs like meth and heroin. In one tearful conversation, he confessed he felt responsible for the deaths of Jen and Robbie. His pain and guilt consumed him. Tragically, not even a year after the incident, Nick died of a heroin overdose in July 2013.
It was my first Halloween living alone in my own house. A small corner home with a basement, but no upstairs. My parents had helped me buy it, and I was enjoying a quiet night. Around 11 p.m., I was watching scary Halloween movies when a knock at the door made me pause. Who could it be at this hour? Surely no trick-or-treaters were left. I looked through the window. Nothing. Thinking it was a prank, I ignored it. But then the knocking returned, louder. Angry now, I opened the door. Still, no one. Frustrated, I searched the bushes, my car, even across the street. Nobody. I double-locked the door and went to bed, yet the pounding continued. Hours later, I woke to hear knocking, not at the front door, but my bedroom door. My heart stopped. Someone was inside the house. Panicking, I grabbed a weapon, then remembered my speaker system. I played a gunshot sound effect on full volume, yelling a warning for them to leave. Footsteps stamped across the floor, then silence. The front door remained wide open, but the intruders were gone. I called the police and finally felt a cautious sense of safety. That Halloween cemented my fear of strangers and the unknown. Even years later, I could never forget the terror of hearing knocks in the dark, the fear of being watched, or the raw panic of thinking someone was inside my home. It was a Halloween I would never forget.
I wasn't much of a Halloween person growing up. Most years I stayed home, especially after I passed the age where I could tag along with my mom. This year I was 14, and my little sister, only 8, was going trick-or-treating with our mom. My friend Steve already had plans, and I didn't want to go alone. When my mom left, I stayed home, handing out candy. It gave me a small sense of purpose. I wasn't just sitting alone. I had a job. Around 6 p.m., the house was quiet, except for the occasional knock on the door. That's when the phone rang, the loud ringer making me jump. I picked it up. Silence. Fumbling noises, faint breathing. Then the line went dead. I assumed it was a prank. But the calls kept coming, always the same pattern. Silence, breathing, a brief hang-up. My unease grew with every ring. Later, I was watching Friday the 13th when the phone rang again. This time, a deep, exaggerated voice spoke. "I'll be paying you a visit tonight." My blood ran cold. I told them to leave me alone and hung up, swearing not to pick up again.
About half an hour later, the power in the house went out. The TV died, the lights went dark, and I was left in complete silence. Then came pounding at the front door, heavy and angry. My heart raced as laughter echoed outside, familiar laughter. I opened the door and saw Steve, my friend, grinning. I shoved him back, furious. "So that was you making all those calls?" I demanded. He nodded, still laughing. Relief and anger battled inside me. But my relief turned to fear when we checked the fuse box outside and saw the wires had been cut. Whoever had been making those calls had tampered with the electricity. We ran inside, called my mom, and waited for the police. The call was traced to a payphone near a nearby bar. I still don't know whether it was a prank that went too far or a real attempt to break in. That Halloween left me shaken. Even years later, the thought of someone targeting my home in the dark makes my stomach turn.
When I was younger,
My friends and I went trick-or-treating every year. One particular Halloween, we passed a man standing completely still, wearing a mask and holding a lantern. As we walked by, he turned his body to follow us with his eyes. We were creeped out, but kept moving, surrounded by other people. Still, we kept spotting him at different houses, always watching us. At one point, he stood in the middle of the road, blocking our path. Terrified, we ran to the nearest house and alerted the owners. The man eventually walked away, disappearing into the night. Later, an adult friend of the family told us they had seen the same man hiding behind a tree, trying to lure children. Only when threatened with police intervention did he finally leave. That Halloween taught me the sharp reality of stranger danger. Even amidst the fun of candy and costumes, the night can hold true terror for a child.
I was trick-or-treating with my friend Casey when we were both 11 years old. As we walked across a small wooden bridge over Jack Winkle River, a black Jeep pulled up, blocking our path. We quickly turned around and hurried away, following the rules about stranger danger. The driver rolled down the window, a raspy smoker's voice calling us back. I yelled sorry, and we ran, thinking we had escaped. An SUV appeared around the corner, braking suddenly in front of us. Two men inside, including an older man with gray curly hair and a mustache, called to us again. They claimed to have free bags of candy. Panic set in as the Jeep maneuvered to follow us, and eventually the two men got out, lunging at us. We dropped our candy and sprinted straight to my house, which was just in sight. I rang the doorbell desperately, at least 20 times, hoping my mom would open the door in time.
My mom opened the door, and we screamed, pointing frantically at the Jeep. The men, realizing we had reached safety, turned back and retreated. Inside, we explained everything to my mom, who immediately called the police. The officers later pulled over the SUV and the black Jeep. 3 men were arrested, those same creepy strangers who had tried to lure us. My dad went outside to confirm their identities, while Casey and I watched from the doorway, relieved but still shaken. Even after that night, the fear lingered. We had come so close to being kidnapped. My parents' quick thinking and the police's intervention had saved us, but the memory of those raspy voices and the men lunging towards us haunted me for years.
The night ended with the 3 men in custody, handcuffed and taken away by the police. I remember screaming at them from the doorway, giving them the finger in anger and relief. My mom pulled us inside and locked the door, finally letting us breathe. That Halloween was a turning point. It showed me how quickly fun and innocence can turn into genuine danger. Even years later, thinking about those moments, the Jeep, the SUV, the raspy voices, still makes my stomach churn. But more importantly, it taught me the value of vigilance and quick action when faced with real threats.
It was Halloween night, and I was 7 years old, taking my daughter Jamie trick-or-treating for a few hours. After returning home, we cooked dinner, watched TV together, and sent her to bed. Feeling especially tired, I went to sleep shortly after. A few minutes later, Jamie came back to my room, insisting there was someone in her closet. I reassured her, telling her she was safe and that she needed to sleep in her own bed. Reluctantly, she returned to her room and shut the door. 5 minutes later, she returned again, frightened, claiming she had heard something moving and things falling over inside her closet. My heart skipped a beat. I decided to walk her to the closet to show her there was nothing there. We turned on the light and listened closely. Then came the thud. Something inside the closet had moved. I immediately told Jamie to run to the neighbors and call the police.
I ran back into Jamie's room, and there he was. Randy, the neighbor's son, sitting on top of her Lego box. I grabbed him by the collar and marched him angrily to his parents' house next door. Jamie followed, ringing the doorbell, as I explained everything to Randy's father, Mark. Randy admitted that he and his friend Daryl had snuck into our house during trick-or-treating. Daryl had even taken some of Jamie's underwear. Fueled by protective anger, I confronted Daryl, slapping him to make my point. I didn't call the police that night, trusting Mark to handle it, but I made it clear, if either of them ever went near Jamie again, they would regret it. After that night, Jamie slept with me, shaken but safe. The next morning, I found a small drill hole in her closet door, proof that the boys had been spying on her while she slept. The horror of that night stuck with me. Even as Jamie grew older, I sometimes wondered if I had done enough to protect her.
Thankfully, nothing further happened with Randy or Daryl. Jamie grew older, and Randy eventually went off to college, disappearing from our lives. But the memory of that night remained vivid. The fear of someone invading our home, the shock of finding intruders in her closet, and the anger I felt as a parent protecting my child. That Halloween taught me that danger can come from the most unexpected places, even from kids we think we know. It left me forever cautious, always aware of what might be lurking in the shadows, and reminded me that vigilance is the price of safety.
We had just moved into a large new house in Mississauga, Ontario, in an area called Winston Churchill. It was Halloween night, and my parents, my 4 sisters, my brother, and I were unpacking our belongings in our new rooms. By 11:30 p.m., well past the usual trick-or-treating hours, we were finishing chores. I was exhausted and ready to sleep. As I headed to my bedroom, I heard what sounded like footsteps in the upstairs hallway. Assuming it was one of my siblings, I shouted at them, but no one answered. Confused and uneasy, I rushed down to the basement, where my parents and siblings were working. They hadn't been upstairs either. I tried to shrug it off as my imagination, convincing myself it was nothing. Returning to my bedroom, I shivered from the sudden cold. I put on a sweater, trying to feel warm and safe.
Around 12:30 a.m., after everyone had gone to sleep, a loud banging sounded from my parents' bedroom. I thought it might be a sibling getting water, but fear held me back from checking alone. The banging grew louder, echoing through the quiet house. I tried to return to sleep, but my room felt impossibly cold. Suddenly, the door to my bedroom creaked open, as if someone were gently pushing it. I froze, heart hammering, as light footsteps moved closer to my bed. Turning onto my side, I saw a figure standing there, a tall figure, at least 7 feet tall. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure finally said, "Boo!" I screamed at the top of my lungs, covering my eyes, when my parents burst into the room and turned on the lights. There was no one there,
My parents looked at me, confused, insisting they hadn't heard any knocking or footsteps. My siblings came into the doorway, watching me panic, unsure what to make of it. But I knew what I had seen. It was too real to be imagined. That night left a lasting impression. Even years later, I could vividly remember the cold air, the footsteps, and the towering figure whispering, "Boo." It was a Halloween that proved fear could strike even within the safety of one's own home, and I would never forget it.
A few years ago, on Halloween night, my friends and I were all 20 years old. We decided to visit a haunted house attraction called Scare House: Journey to the Basement. It had only operated for 4 years and was known for being extremely high quality and terrifying. This haunted house wasn't guided. It was a maze where the only way out was to navigate through the rooms, reach the basement, find a key, and then locate the exit to unlock it. The design was intricate, with fake doors and twists to confuse visitors. We started in the living room. A giant open coffin sat in the center. Spiderwebs covered every corner. Furniture looked antique and dusty, and bloodstains marked the creaky wooden floors. We knew right away this haunted house was going to be intense.
The next room was the dining room, and that's where the creepiness intensified. Dim lanterns hung from the walls, casting shadows across the antique furniture. Actors in horrifyingly realistic costumes jumped out at us multiple times, making our hearts race. We wandered through the maze for what felt like hours, often going in circles, trying to find the basement. Each room seemed narrower and darker, filled with false doors to mislead us. Finally, we discovered the basement door, completely pitch black inside. No cell phones were allowed, so we couldn't use light to guide our way. Each step creaked painfully, echoing like nails on a chalkboard. I reached out blindly, trying to feel anything in the darkness. Suddenly, I bump into someone. "Who's there?" I asked, expecting it to be a friend. No answer. Then, a hand rested on my shoulder. I bolted, screaming and laughing at the same time, my adrenaline surging. There was something deeply disturbing about being trapped in complete darkness, knowing someone or something was there with us.
One of my friends finally found a key on a desk in the corner. We sprinted back upstairs, into the light, and located the exit. Just outside the door was a small bin labeled, "Drop keys here, please." That's where visitors returned the basement keys. As we stepped outside, a tall man in a black robe and a bloody pig mask emerged, following us. At first, we thought he was just another actor from the haunted house, but as we walked further away, he continued to follow us for several blocks. Even when we jokingly ran, he mirrored our movements. We felt genuinely unsafe. Only when we reached Eddie's house, where his parents were home, did the man finally stop. Eddie's dad aimed a gun at him, warning him never to return. We later contacted the haunted house. They confirmed no employee was dressed in a pig mask. That night stayed with us for years, proof that some scares aren't just part of the attraction.
I was 22 years old, attending a Halloween party
at my former best friend Nick's house. Nick had passed away from a heroin overdose in 2013. But before that, he was obsessed with Halloween. Every year, his parents flew to New York, leaving him free to throw enormous Halloween parties. Nick spent a fortune decorating his house, giant walls of cardboard covered in wallpaper, creating a haunted maze. Horrifying props filled every room. Even without alcohol or drugs, the atmosphere alone was intense. That night, I was upstairs with Nick and a few other friends. Vinny G, Joey, and Q, when we heard two loud bangs from downstairs. Panic set in immediately. Screams echoed through the house, male and female, a crowd in terror. Nick ran to the door, but quickly returned, shutting and locking it behind him. His face was pale, haunted, like someone who had just witnessed murder. We all instinctively knew something terrible was happening.
Nick hit the lights and hid in the closet with Joey, while I scrambled under the bed with Q. Vinny G squeezed himself into a storage box. From our hiding spots, we could hear the music downstairs cut off, replaced by a man shouting at everyone to be quiet. Two other men's voices joined in, confirming at least 3 intruders in the house. Boots stomped up the stairs and stopped outside the bedroom door. One of them rammed the door repeatedly until finally the doorknob was shot, breaking the lock. Cries erupted from downstairs. Nick begged for mercy, offering money and valuables to save lives. He was taken downstairs while the rest of us remained hidden, trembling. Silence stretched for what felt like 20 minutes, broken only by the sound of the front door slamming shut. Nick eventually returned upstairs. The intruders were gone, but the damage was done. 2 of our friends, Jen and Robbie, had been killed. The police were focused on finding the killers, ignoring the drugs and chaos inside Nick's house.
After the attack, Nick's life spiraled downward. He became depressed, turned to alcohol, dropped out of school, and eventually began using meth and heroin. In one raw, emotional conversation, he admitted to me that he lived with constant guilt, believing he caused the deaths of his friends. Less than a year later, in July 2013, Nick died of a heroin overdose. That Halloween night haunted me forever. The terror, the screams, the helplessness, and the lasting consequences on someone I had called my best friend. It was my first Halloween living on my own. Even though I had survived, the fear of that night stayed with me, shaping my understanding of real danger and loss forever.
We were all 20 years old and excited to visit haunted house attractions on Halloween. One particular attraction, Scare House Journey to the Basement, was famous locally, but only operated for 4 years. This was its final year, and it promised a unique, terrifying experience. The haunted house was designed as a maze. There were no guides. Participants had to explore, find the basement, locate a key, and then reach the exit to unlock the door. Each room was designed to mislead visitors, with fake doors, antique furniture, and dim lanterns lighting narrow hallways. The first room we entered had a giant coffin in the center, spider webs covering the corners, and blood-stained floors. Actors in horrifying costumes jumped out repeatedly. Even though we expected it, the adrenaline made our hearts pound. We wandered through the maze, moving from room to room. Each space was dimly lit by lanterns, and actors in grotesque costumes jumped at us at unexpected moments.
The maze was designed to confuse. We often found ourselves going in circles while trying to locate the basement. Finally, we reached the basement door. It was pitch black inside. No cell phones were allowed, so we had to navigate blindly. Each step creaked loudly, echoing like nails on a chalkboard. I reached out and accidentally bumped into someone. A hand landed on my shoulder. Panic surged through me as I bolted, screaming and laughing at the same time. The basement felt disturbingly alive, as if someone or something was following us, waiting in the shadows.
One of my friends finally found a key on a desk in the basement. We ran back upstairs into the light and headed for the exit. Just outside, a small bin labeled "Drop Keys Here" collected the basement keys. As we stepped outside, a tall man in a black robe and a bloody pig mask appeared, following us. At first, we assumed he was a staff member, but as we walked several blocks away, he continued to follow. Even when we ran, he mirrored our movements. We finally reached Eddie's house, where his parents were home. His father aimed a gun at the man, ordering him to leave and never return. Contacting the haunted house later confirmed that no employee had been dressed in that pig mask. That night stayed with us. Some scares, it turned out, weren't part of the attraction. They were real, and the memory haunted us for years.